everything around me. Green, get the money, dollar bill, yo.
What's up, guys? Today we're going to be talking about animation cancels and skill ceiling. How much of a skill gap is too much? So Crowfall just recently nuked almost all of the animation cancels in the game, meaning that if you animation cancel something, it will cut off the previous ability, so doing it is really not worthwhile anymore. Slayer duelists in particular lost like 4 to 5 animation cancels with this global change. However, almost every class lost something, whether that be Templar Divine Light cancels, parry canceling, dodge canceling, block canceling. There were a ton of little animation cancels that you could do if you were a more advanced player. It was definitely an advanced technique for most of the classes. Slayer in particular, a lot of the Slayer animation cancels were actually detrimental if you did them wrong, at least some of the more advanced ones. But also, a lot of the flash castable abilities, their whole claim to fame and the whole point of their existence was that you could animation cancel with them. I'm honestly not 100% sure if the flash cast nerf is intended. I feel like those abilities were actually intended to be used for animation canceling. Otherwise, I don't know why they really exist or why that's even a selling point if they don't animation cancel. So I think that might actually get changed back to the way it was. But the rapid fire canceling and the dodge canceling and the backpacking from Gears of War and block canceling and things like that, I think are probably gone for good. And there's a lot of players that are not super happy with that because they like the skill differential. They like that, you know, if you're a player that learns those and gets that muscle memory down, that technique down, and knows when to do it, they like that it gives you a little bit of an edge in the fights. And I 100% see where those people are coming from, but I also understand where the developers are coming from, because it's very hard to balance a game when you have these weird little quirks in it that allow for the better players to really start pulling ahead of the normal players. So that's kind of what this video is about. How much is too much when it comes to these kind of mechanics? And if you want to see these animation canceling mechanics in their full glory, I recommend you check out the Zyback 3 montage. The opening segment of Zyback 3 is animation canceling pushed to its absolute limit. I mean, there are clips where I do over 6,000 damage in 3 seconds. That Avenger Sama clip at the start of Zyback 3, I do over 6,000 damage in 3 seconds. So that is animation canceling pushed to its absolute extreme, with the caveat that was also a very, very fortunate situation for me where the stars perfectly aligned, and a very, very unfortunate situation for him where the stars perfectly aligned for him in a negative way. So the thing about skill gaps is that they're fun until they make the game so inaccessible that it largely kills your game. So games like Darkfall had very, very high skill caps, but the games were so inaccessible that the player base, you couldn't acquire new users because new users would have such a terrible experience getting shit on by veteran players that they just wouldn't stick around, and then the veteran players got bored because everybody was quitting their game. Same goes for critically acclaimed games. There are critically acclaimed games that have a skill gap problem which led to their downfall. Perfect example. I don't know a single person that would tell you that this is a bad game, but it died, and that game is Titanfall 2. The game is beloved by everybody I've ever heard that's played Titanfall 2. Loves the game, love the campaign, love the multiplayer. Awesome gunplay, movement, mechanics, gameplay in general was fantastic in that game. Everyone that I talked to said that game deserved better. Why did it die? I mean, why did it die? Part of the reason it died was because the skill gap. I mean, good players just absolutely dumpstered bad players. I have videos of me single-handedly getting more points than everybody else on my team and the enemy team combined. That's how much of a skill gap there was in Titanfall 2. If you knew how to move, and if you knew how the map worked and how the spawns worked and all that little stuff, I mean, the skill gap was unbelievable in that game, and it was really fun because it's fun to progress, and it's fun to get better, and you know, you start off as an average player, then you get better and better and better and better, and you can feel yourself getting better as you move up, and that progression is addicting. But at the same time, it sucks when you're at the bottom of that ladder too. And new players in Titanfall just didn't stick around because they just got dumped on. So here's what's happening. So games like Titanfall, these arcade shooters in particular, are starting to heavily rely on skill-based matchmaking in these public, in the public unranked matchmaking. They are putting ranked matchmaking in unranked games because they are trying to alleviate the skill gap. Basically, they do not want skill gaps in their users. They want everyone to be at the exact same point. And that sounds like a good thing. It sounds like it's a good idea to have everybody in the same skill bracket in the same game, but it's actually not. It's actually a terrible thing because it makes the games repetitive. It makes your experience, when you play Call of Duty and everybody's the same skill level, it makes the game bland and boring because you know what to expect always. The game plays the same way. But when you have people that are better than you and worse than you, it's all of a sudden different. Every game you go into is different because you don't know if you're going to be getting a bunch of noobs and you're going to dominate everybody, or you might be the noob, or you might have a mix of both. That is far more fun to me. So you see more and more games leaning on this skill-based matchmaking, whether it be an arcade shooter like Call of Duty or Fortnite, for example, added it in. Not very popular. If you type in SBMM on Reddit, all it is people complaining because the skill-based matchmaking gets added to whatever game, and then all of a sudden the game becomes unfun and just the same thing over and over and over again because these developers are desperately trying to make the skill gap as little as possible to try and retain new players. So a lot of people instantly go like, oh man, skill gap, that's anything, all those mechanics that make the better players stand out are always better. Well, then why are all these developers trying to get away from that? I think the skill-based matchmaking is particularly evil when it's done in unranked game modes. When you play an unranked game mode and you actually can't feel yourself getting better at the game because all the game is doing is trying to push you towards a 1KD, that feels terrible. However, when it's ranked, nobody minds skill-based matchmaking in a ranked game mode where you have a rank and you can see yourself actually progressing and getting better. That makes sense, but in unranked, it doesn't. However, they're not doing that. They are pushing these skill-based matchmaking systems in unranked game modes. So that just goes to show you where what's happening in the video game development. So to get back to Crowfall, Crowfall has no sort of matchmaking whatsoever. It's a completely open world game. A brand new player is at the complete mercy of a veteran player that's been playing the game for 5 years and has the best stuff in the game. So there is a pretty large gap between a veteran player and a new player. And that gap is not gear. In most MMOs, it is gear. It is not gear in this game. Gear in Crowfall is really a pretty minor thing. It's really not a big deal, especially with the way the stats work. It's hard to explain to somebody that hasn't actually played the game, but like the difference between 300 attack power and 500 attack power when it comes to actual damage done is very, very minor. They have done a pretty good job in Crowfall in making the gear not that big of a deal. The big thing is knowledge. Crowfall is very knowledge-based. If you have the knowledge of how all the other classes work, what's meta, what works, what's good in what situation, you are very, very powerful. People say Crowfall has very little mechanical skill. I disagree. There are games with more mechanical skill. I'm not going to deny that. But the people that say Crowfall has very low mechanical skill, aren't playing the game in its optimal way. The top players in Crowfall, if you watch the top videos from the best players in Crowfall right now, there are tons of mistakes. You can just poke holes constantly in their gameplay over and over and over again. My gameplay included. You can poke holes in it constantly. So yes, the game doesn't have the absolute highest, most pinnacle skill cap from an individual mechanical perspective. Sure, it doesn't. But that doesn't mean that anybody's anywhere close to it. So, and a lot of the Crowfall skill gap is going to come from team play. I think really coordinated groups is where you're going to see really cool stuff come out of Crowfall's combat. So the challenge with a game like Crowfall is how do you make the game fun for the veteran player so he feels like he's progressing his skills, but not so unfun for a new player that they just get completely stomped and don't play the game. In the previous patch, Slayer was a perfect example of tiny little skill gap increasing things that just added up to be pretty immense. You had the flintlock canceling, where you could hide your flintlock shot in a global cooldown and effectively get a free GCD out of it. You had that. Then you had dodge rolling when your gun's fired off to get free damage. Then you had the rapid fire cancels with the LMB to get the extra 200 damage. Oh, by the way, that rapid fire cancel thing was only about 200 extra damage. So a lot of people thought that was way more overblown than it was. I didn't bother correcting those people because I thought it was funny that they just perpetuated this like lie of it being like thousands of damage. But anyway, so you had tons of these little, there was about 5 animation cancels that you could do that added up to be just a tiny bit of damage each. But if you could master each individual one, then you could pull off some pretty outrageous shit, as you saw in Zyback 3. And that progression of slowly, learning them, first of all, like figuring them out. I think I was one of the few people that was actually utilizing at least all of them that I knew of. Maybe there was more of them. But figuring those out and then mastering them mechanically and then figuring out when to do them, when not to do them, like that's really cool from a player progression standpoint. But, Johnny Two Thumbs over here that just started playing the game, he doesn't know any of those. He doesn't know any of those, and he's getting completely bodied by the guys that do. How much is too much? I don't know. It's a tough question. I'm curious where you guys land on the animation canceling thing. Should they have stayed in the game, or should they have been removed? I could have gone either way. I can see maybe a more fine-tooth approach to this, fine-tooth comb to this, rather than just completely nuking all of them. But I think they wanted to completely nuke all of them just so they could start from ground zero, because there is a big patch coming with a discipline update that's going to completely change the balance and the meta of the game entirely. So I can understand why they just wanted to go, hey, no animation cancels globally. If we want to add them in later, we will. If we want to give people back their animation cancels, maybe we will. Or maybe they just don't want that mechanic at all. Maybe they don't want animation canceling to be a skill thing in this game. They just don't want that to be a particular vector that you increase your power, efficiency by. So anyway, I'm curious what you guys think. How much of a skill gap is too much? Keep in mind that Crowfall is a PvP MMO. We need players. The players are the content. So you can't just say, screw the noobs. I don't care if they quit. No, we need the noobs. We need new people to play the game. So keep that in mind before you just go, we need every skill increasing thing possible. But you also need something, right? You need something to go for and to really set yourself apart from the masses, because it does suck when everybody is just globally a 1KD, right? Like, that's terrible too. So let me know what you guys think. If you're interested in Crowfall, sign up my link in the description down below, and I will see you next time. Have a good one.